Oh,
This meeting is being recorded.
well, that's quite cool. Fathom note taker, recording and taking notes, but where does it go to? That's the question. Like, okay,
That
it's
is a good
recording and
question.
taking notes. Where? Well, this is already super interesting. Like this, it shows up as a different screen. Like, wow,
Yeah, I just hit it in the corner.
the Fathom button, or
Yeah, I just went to view in the top right and clicked speaker view.
mhm. Yep, we can do that. Okay, anyway, let's get into this. I guess we should start with yeah, why don't you frame this for us? Take it away, Ernie.
Well, we don't have a structure set out today, but nominally we're going to talk about individuation and your recent transformative experiences, I guess in the context of individuation, but also the wider context of the metacrisis and maybe also being in your mid 20s and that particular time of life. And we both have also just traveled a lot. And Sam's back home now, but I'm in the UK, so I'm sure that's quite related and significant as well to our discussions. Yeah, but I guess maybe we could start with this principle that you discussed in your video of the I forget her name, that Jewish prophetess
Maria
that said
Prophetessa. Yeah,
Maria prophetessa.
from the 15th
Yeah, her
century. Yeah.
okay. Yeah, her principle that one becomes two and then two becomes three and then that becomes four, which goes back to the original one. And the third, so the in Jung's um, interpretation of that, the one is the conscious ego, and then the two is the unconscious, and then the third is the transcendent function. Have I got that right, or is that kind of oversimplifying it or incorrect?
Yeah, so one becomes two, two becomes three, and from the third comes the one as the fourth, is this quote from Maria Prophetessa all the way back in the 15th century, and it was quoted by Jung in Psychology and Alchemy, the second part thereof. And it refers to a kind of archetypal structure, and because like obviously when we're talking about phenomena such as one, two, three, and four, those are quite deep phenomena, right? So like there's a way that we can apply that uh, quote and the archetypal structure to which it refers to different local contexts, where like Jung is applying it in like a psychological context of using it to talk about, for example, conscious and unconscious. This is one like version of the two, right? One becomes two. It could become black and white or masculine and feminine or whatever kind of heaven and earth, but Jung is using it to talk about conscious and unconscious as an example or an instance of something deeper.
Right. So are you saying that the psyche becomes the conscious and unconscious? Did I get that right?
Yeah, well, at least in Jung's conception of the psyche, it conceives of the psyche obviously as this combination of unconscious and conscious aspects. And then, yeah, he uses this dichotomy to then refer to and point to um, the transcendent function, which he thinks of as the mediating process, which is also another way to talk about the problem of three and four, which in some way lies between and beneath the two that we're talking about. For Jung, that's the transcendent function. It has to do with, yeah, this mediating process between polarities, dichotomies, dualities. Um, yeah. And so like,
Mm.
oh yeah, how does that line with you? That understanding of that quote?
Um, yeah, that makes sense. What do you mean the problem of 3 and 4 lies beneath the problem of 1 and 2?
Yeah, it gets quite arcane quite quickly. The problem of 3 and 4 is something that Jung noticed. Jung is sort of attuned to what he feels is the deficiencies of the Christian scheme of things, which involves a three, a trinity, in the shape of a triangle, let's say. And Jung was sort of concerned with this creating space for a fourth, which is not included in that three. Um,
Mm.
and so that fourth, in this context, refers to anything that, in this context, Jung feels is not really included in that three in the Christian scheme of things. And that could be the shadow, it could be the feminine, it could be nature itself. And this is part of Jung's orientation toward what he calls like psychic wholeness. So one way of what Jung feels is restoring kind of wholeness to the too spiritualized and too abstract Christian Trinity is by turning that three, symbolized by the triangle, into a four, symbolized by um, a quadrated circle or a mandala. So
Right. And
that's a
as
Jungian take on the problem of 3 and 4. It's kind of like this restoring psychic wholeness by including uh, a disallowed or repressed element of our spiritual hierarchy or of ourselves.
right. So in terms of Christianity, he hypothesized that the 4 could be different things. You mentioned the shadow or the feminine,
Uh-huh.
but there lacks
Yeah.
the appropriate symbol for that in the Holy
Yes.
Trinity.
Yes. So because we're talking about the problem of 3 and 4, again, this is like any three and any four. So we're talking about like symbolic and archetypal categories.
Yeah.
And that's what allows me to say that um, when we say the three, like we're talking again about like from two becomes three, and from the third comes the one as the fourth. And we're taking this quote and we're applying it to how Jung conceived the problem of 3 and 4. And I'm also specifying that problem of Jung's in Christian terminology, or how Jung was relating with Christianity. And this is already like several layers of specificity that we're using to unpack this archetypal and symbolic structure. So, for example, like we're talking about the three here, and we're talking about the Christian Trinity, which is the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. This is one way of talking about the three, but there could be many other ways. For example, there's a three which is you and I here, and something which is holding the conversation together. That's also a three, but it's a different kind of three. Does that make
Okay, I
sense?
see. Yeah. So is he saying that the symbology of if you live in a culture or a set of symbols where the kind of primary metaphysical representation of the universe is a set of 3 and not a set of 4, that indicates some psychic immaturity, or is that what he's kind of suggesting?
That's what he's getting at, yeah. Um, it's not to say that three doesn't have a deep truth associated with it. But certainly for Jung, Jung felt that it was in a way incomplete. Um, he suggested that, for example, part of the evidence for that was Christianity, sort of 2,000 years of um, not really being able to improve the material conditions of poor people among us. Like there's a kind of there's a concern for that Christ is going to come and save us, or there's a preparation for life after death. There's a consideration that is primarily not about the things of this world, and specifically the things that are like low to do. Like there's a number of different, just say, phenomena that don't fit easily or completely within that spiritual hierarchy. This is like the repression of paganism. It's the disavowal of the shadow. It's the non-inclusion of. It's the burning of the witches. It's the it's that there's an orthodoxy, and it's masculine, right? And it's a triangle, and it's like this is how it is. This is what we're aiming for toward, uh, you know, the one God. And anyone who doesn't fit in with that scheme is, a troublemaker, essentially, and that's all. Um, at least this was what Jung was attuned to. He felt that this, um, it's not that there's uh, it's not that it's wrong. It's that it's incomplete. It leaves us with a kind of hunger or yearning. So this is part of Jung's basic diagnosis that we're disconnected from our roots, that we're cut off, that we've become overly like top heavy, and that we're disconnected, and that the path to healing, like the solution to that, is to reconnect with the depths in some way. And the important point about this is that basic diagnosis and prescription, which is certainly shared by Paul Tillich and Heidegger and John Vervaeke, this is the meaning crisis, right? The thing about the solution, that reconnecting with our depths, is that um, it's it's a metaphysical problem. It's a theological problem. It's a spiritual problem. It's not a problem that's at the surface of things. It's a problem that constitutes our lives. It's something that we
Yeah,
participate in very deeply. And this is
right.
the reason that
It's
he's talking about this Christian lens on the problem, if that makes sense.
yeah. So it's a deeply held kind of ideology in or worldview, I guess is a better word. But it's so deeply held that we just it's the air we breathe, I guess. Um, yeah,
Mm.
okay. So if we could bring it back to the more personal,
Yeah.
so how in your recent kind of experiences, in your video you talked about when when a cognitive animal is faced with a problem that's intractable, they go back on into their inner strengths and try to draw them out to be able to solve this problem that they can't currently solve. And it kind of sounds like something happened for you in that way in your encounters with the symbol of the self.
Yeah.
And yeah, I'd like to hear more about that and how that relates to the transcendent function.
Hmm. Okay, well, I'll have to share a few things for context here. So, like, yes, we are talking about like um, a period of deep inner work that involves transformative experience in my life, and we're trying to both of us understand that better and its relevance to our lives today, right? And I can say that period of inner work was in the it occurred at the culmination of several weeks of quite intense inner work, but it was also at the sort of culminating point of several months of uh, deep investigation into a particular problem, but then also the again culmination of many years of work on a particular problem, namely, let's call it the metacrisis, just for simplicity or ease of reference. There's an idea that yeah, like the rivalrous dynamics, like this conflict or separateness between people, is in at the same time as having all this superpowered technology, is a kind of combination that tends to result in human extinction, actually, unless we sort of go through some kind of cultural enlightenment, some kind of renaissance of who we are, what it means to really be human. And so there's some kind of, again, change or transformation that's required at the level of culture, at the level of the stories that we tell, um, that it seems to me is a prerequisite for us to keep living on the planet. Um, and so, yeah, for me, this was a sort of really grappling with this existential situation of like the impending demise of myself and everyone that I love and care for, and also the species to which I belong. And I also feel that it's a kind of ontological or spiritual war, meaning I'm not convinced that everything would sort of continue and just be fine if humans were to disappear. I think that everything depends on what we call humanity in some way, and that we're all in it together, so to speak, um, or that humanity is in some way ground zero of what we call existence or reality. Um, and so, just to say that I care deeply about that sort of collective existential problem, and that's really been shaping and guiding and influencing my work and my inner work also. Um, I might add to that I then sort of, by studying Schmachtenberger and Viveki and Jordan Hall and Jamie Wheal, sort of traced the roots of the metacrisis back to some of the threads that started like the longest time ago of like, oh, it's not capitalism which is the problem. It's something a fair bit deeper. Um, the problem didn't start with Ronald Reagan, guys. It doesn't even start with the Industrial Revolution. It doesn't even start with the Agrarian Revolution, although that already takes us back like 10 or 12,000 years. The thread of the problem that I was working on has to do with the technology, the techne, because as Schmachtenberger is saying, by the time we start using stone tools, this is already leading to ecological overshoot in many different environments all over the planet, and a breaking of the co-selection dynamics between different species. What this means is that the origins of the meta crisis are around that sort of time, some of the deepest drivers of it, and that if we really want to be solving it like deeply, then we need to be considering that. And so that sort of diagnosis of like orienting all the way back to prehistory and talking about the dynamics that were going on there and trying to understand how things occurred at that level is very much like in my mind and something that I'm have been focusing on. Um, I guess the other side of it would be this like deep. Uh, I've been drawn into Jung, but it's just one language. That's the thing. It's just one interpretive scheme or one lens to use to get to like the depth of this. I'm not wanting to like, I'm not saying that Jungian analysis is like the be all and end all or anything like that. I actually think Jung was far better.
Mm.
He's talking about this like metaphysical problem. He's actually not, there are other psychologists that are as good, if not better. So being attached to
Yeah,
Jung, it's not about that for me at all. Yeah.
and he would say himself that you shouldn't be a Jungian, right?
Yeah.
You should do your own thing. He's didn't he say his life's work was discovering his own his life's work was his own individuation process, right? The symbols that appeared to him and the way he conceptualized the psyche was kind of his own take on it. And he certainly got pretty far, but there are other people as well. Yeah. Yeah,
Mm.
totally.
Mm.
Um,
Sorry,
yeah,
I
so
should. Yeah, I'm trying to
we have
get
this
to a
context.
position where I can answer your
Yeah.
question. Yeah. Uh, Um,
Okay. Yeah.
I won't take too much longer. Just to say that, what do I want to say here? I mean, like, part of what I'm focusing on is this, like, we need to work out how to not exploit all the ecological niches on the planet. We have to like leave some of them alone. We also have to work out how to build complex systems rather than complicated systems, which is never something that humans have been able to do before. Meaning, like, we're good at building iPhones and jet airplanes, all of which break unless we have like engineering expertise. But we're not very good at building a rainforest or an eyeball. Those things are much harder. This is a real problem, as it turns out. And we need to work out some kind of anti-rivalrous basis for coordination. Feeling that we're separate from each other, feeling like there's actually a story that we tell ourselves that there's Ben over there and there's Sam over here, and that our interests are fundamentally kind of in conflict or misaligned with each other. And so this is what I mean by I have this kind of orientation toward, hey, we need some kind of cultural technologies here that can help us to do the work of like mending, healing, recombining, synthesizing, reconnecting with each other, establishing trust without a whole lot of prior experience with each other. This sort of a dynamic. And that this kind of, yeah, reconciliation of opposites applied socially, applied in groups, for example, could be a significant contributing factor in working out a way of life that is capable of adequately responding to the situation of the metacrisis. And that's been talked about in detail in other places, like as per Vervaeke and Schmachtenberger, we need like ecologies of practices among communities of practitioners with a viable worldview. And I'm sort of contributing one piece of that, which is a bit of the yeah, a piece of some psychotechnologies, some skills, some procedures, some method as to how to actually do that. And I guess to say that when I was like deeply focusing on this aspect of the problem and how I could contribute in group settings to, um, yeah, essentially restoring some of the foundations of culture that we've left behind, I was focused on that in this through this deeply Jungian language. Just as one language to use, I mean, pick whichever language you choose. We have to get down to the root, the core of the problem, which is fundamentally beneath the interpretation layer, I want to say. Um, and
What do
so
you
that
mean by
was,
that, beneath the interpretation layer?
yeah, like you know, you can take an anthropologist, take a complex systems scientist, take a feminist, take someone that's not in the academy at all. You know, take a plumber. You know, take whoever you like, and they all have different converging perspectives, points of view on the same fundamental underlying reality, or that we feel is the same anyway. And it's kind of like um, I'm talking about like yeah, trying to uncover or unveil more of what reality is for itself and trying to bring humanity like collectively into better alignment with that no matter who we are. And so what I'm saying is that like we can't do that just by using a new paradigm. It's not like, oh, we just need this new paradigm. We need to apply this model. It's beneath the layer of models. It's beneath the layer of paradigms. This truth that we need to reconnect with, which I call, you know, yeah, reality itself. And so what I mean by that is it's not that our interpretive lens is unimportant, but it's like we're still in the meta crisis, whether we're a Buddhist or a Hindu or a Christian or whether we're atheistic or whatever our academic training or whatever, like whichever perspective we come from, there's the same fundamental underlying ground, the groundless ground that's beneath us. And it's that to which I'm oriented. And because I'm getting there through a kind of Jungian kaleidoscope doesn't mean that I'm not still oriented, you know, to what that kaleidoscope is pointing to. Um, does that make sense? Not really.
Yeah, so are you saying in your, so you're approaching this cultural, this necessity for cultural transformation with an engineering kind of mindset, um, but also stemming from a Jungian background. But when you say that I'm trying to point to the truth in itself, what does that actually, how do you actually do that? Is that just
Yeah,
intellectual humility and
it partly involves
trying
that.
to talk to as many people with different worldviews and different backgrounds who are
Certainly.
trying to also get to the root cause or the do a first principles take on the meta crisis and what we do about it?
hmm Yeah, so like the metaphor here is like I forget who's painting, but like there's an elephant which is like in the darkness and everyone can like reach a different part of the elephant. And together, if we can like share our different points of view, then the differences between our point of view are the basis of synergy, are the basis of
Yeah,
like genuinely creative collaboration rather than the basis of irreconcilable conflict. And so the thing is that the solution that we're looking for, this like deeper connection with reality itself, it can't be designed, it can't be engineered, actually. It can't be strategized towards. We can integrate and include the strategizing mind within a larger sphere, but fundamentally it's about getting out of our own way so as to allow ourselves to become like an aperture um, to allow ourselves to become porous so that uh, reality itself can actually emerge naturally through us. So what I'm saying is that I'm talking about emergent processes. I'm talking about the phenomena of self-organization. I'm not talking about like designing or engineering a better solution. I'm talking about allowing a better solution to naturally arise from within us, because we are also nature.
Okay, but if there was an element of intentionality to wanting to accelerate the addressing of the metacrisis, then how pragmatically would one go about trying to help? Would it be through, in terms of the cultural change, would it be adopting these various psychotechnologies and then just seeing what emerges from that?
That's a part of it. It's a very tricky balance that you're pointing to, where we kind of have to know a bit of what we're looking for. Like we have a sense of the right direction that we're looking for, but we're not wanting to like control or bind the process too tightly to be too, yeah, controlling or egotistical or presumptive, because we actually don't know what we're looking for. We're trying to allow for the emergence of fundamentally new phenomena, like something that that no one has ever seen before, or maybe that people used to see a long time ago. Ultimately, it doesn't matter whether you regard it as completely new or simply a recovery or remembering of something which is inherently ancient. Um, but you are asking the how question, and certainly, yeah, we need an ecology of psychotechnologies in a community of practitioners that looks like a monastery-based model to establish something called a catalytic community. Um, and yeah, a good analogy here from this is from Jordan Hall is about supersaturated solutions in culture, where so if you take something like water and you heat it up and then dissolve some sugar into it, you can dissolve more sugar in the water since the water is hot than if the water were cold, just because of like physics, chemistry principles. If the water then cools down, the water with the sugar in it becomes what's called supersaturated, which means it has like more sugar in it than it's like allowed to based on phys physics principles or whatever. And what this implies is that when you like hit the water, like when you like disrupt it, it goes through a kind of state change where it like immediately crystallizes into solid form, like instantaneously. And we need that kind of process, but in culture. So we're talking about initiating, the human collectivity into some kind of transformative experience that could ensure the, yeah, sustainable continuation of life on planet Earth, under the recognition that if we continue the way that things are going, that's very much not assured. In fact, the opposite. The thing is that I just invoked a certain worldview that is kind of required for genuine, I think, full participation in this catalytic community that I'm talking about. But I'm also talking about just getting like I'm talking about the funnest and most meaningful process that anyone could imagine participating in. That it doesn't matter whether we talk about the meaning crisis or anything else. We can get there through talking about any worldview. This is why I was like, yeah, we can use a Jungian lens, but whatever, we can use any other lens. I'm talking about getting deeper than that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that does make sense. Yeah. Okay, so how can we bring this back to the
Yeah.
personal and your kind of what's been
Yep.
germinating for you recently? Um, yeah, because I'm really interested to hear about that.
Well, thank you. I don't take that interest lightly. Um, I mean, you can tell just from listening to me that I've been like deeply wrestling with this, you know, problem, and that it's an existential problem. It's not just a theoretical problem. It's something that I'm living in. It's like constructing and constituting my life, where like a lot of what other people have found meaningful to pursue, I don't see as meaningful because I'm like, oh, that's just participating in what the problem is. rather than trying to work out new creative solutions. So just to say that I've been like wrestling with this, however you want to talk about it, for years. And then, yeah, I encountered this quote from Maria Prophetessa that we talked about. One becomes two, two becomes three, and from the third comes the one as the fourth. And I've been really deeply immersed in, yeah, Jung's conceptualization of the problem of three and four, and realizing that there's a kind of part of the problem here is this disavowal of the shadow. Like it's Jung said, we are the origin of all coming evil. And there's a way that the reason for this anthropocentrism, this focus on humanity, is because we're the ones causing all the havoc. We're the ones causing all the mayhem. And it's this like inability to really reconcile with ourselves and really confront ourselves, really look at what we're doing and who we are. It's that which is a really good take on what the problem is. Um, and so, yeah, from that recognition, I, I, there was an occasion when I experienced this quotation from Maria Prophetessa as a kind of metaphysical or archetypal key. And so there's a way that I was not only able to, I didn't just understand this quote intellectually, I was able to experience it in real time.
Right, like a Zen koan,
Yeah,
that kind of propositional
yes.
statement that becomes non-propositional and I guess participatory or perspectival in a way. It
Hmm.
provokes a revelation.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And so there's a
Yeah.
way
So
that it sort of unfolded over the course of a day and then folded up again. And I could talk more about what I mean by that, but just to say that I had this like deeply existential or participatory new understanding of what this quote was pointing to. Um, and it's really pointing to aspects of our phenomenological experience, like in real time here, because I'm saying there's a way in which we're actually embedded in a structure right now. And I'm trying to use elements of this quote to point to different aspects of that structure in which we're embedded. I'm saying that it's sort of implicit or unconscious within our present awareness. But by talking about different elements of the quote, we can kind of bring it more into our awareness, and that can be useful and interesting in terms of the problem as I've laid it out.
mm, yeah, okay. So I think talking about examples can be helpful for me because it really brings it into something concrete and takes it out of the abstract.
Yeah.
Um, so this experience over this day, um, you encountered a symbol of the self, and I'm just trying to paraphrase what we talked about last time. So you had this encounter with the shadow, or these kind of parts of yourself that were quite
Well,
manipulative or exploitative, and that was real conflict. But then on during this day, you encountered a symbol of the self, and that felt like an untapped source of strength and joy. And then you also had this revelation about how we're always giving birth to the future through our relations, our relations, our internal relations within the psyche. Um, yeah, how does that fit with you?
yeah, so I should just offer some like brilliant paraphrase of a whole conversation, by the way. But I should offer some clarity that like this occasion that I'm mentioning, where this sort of archetypal key or metaphysical key sort of opened up and then closed down over the course of a day. This was like toward the beginning of July in 2025. But there were then like a series of experiences over that month that followed that
Okay.
occasion. And the final one of those six was this experience of the what Jung would call the self that you're referring to. Um, so, and what I mean by that is that like there was a on this initial occasion that I'm describing where I sort of experienced like a deeper participation in this quote from Maria Prophetessa. I feel that I noticed something or worked out something Something was sort of discovered or uncovered there, and it was then sort of fleshed out and applied throughout the rest of the month. And it was applied first and foremost within myself or intrapsychically. And so this was sort of like the first, if you like, domain or sphere of application of something that I had uncovered. Does that make sense?
The intrapsychic application was the first kind
Yeah,
of embodied understanding of this
I can be less
psychic key,
abstract.
this principle.
Yes, absolutely. What I'm talking about is the process of reconciliation between the opposites. And so I'm saying that this quote from Maria Prophetessa and my participation in the existential or archetypal reality that it points to, my participation in that sort of unlocked an understanding of a process of reconciliation between opposites that can be invoked. And when I understood that, it then over the preceding weeks came to sort of bring up and then go about the reconciliation of a fundamental conflict of opposites within me. So what I'm talking about is like a general process that could be used, I believe, to reconcile the conflict or tension between any pair of opposites. And the first sort of instance or again application of this was within me.
Mm. Which is kind of necessarily where it has to be, right? If you're
Yeah.
to really understand it. Yeah. And in this case, what were the opposites? If you could put a box on them and give them names or describe
Yeah.
them.
Well, for me, it had to do with this confrontation with the shadow. So I would talk about that mythically in terms of the confrontation between good and evil. But yeah, confrontation with the shadow is maybe a um, more approachable, less less mythic way of talking about it. So yeah, it
And
basically like it put me in
yeah,
the face of those aspects or elements of myself that I really didn't want to see, and it made me like grapple between them. So like I was trying to like deal with this view of myself, this point of view that I felt within myself that was not very friendly. Um, and I was really grappling with that, and it was this like tension between these different aspects of myself. And I realized that I couldn't solve that at the level of the ego, at the level of the problem-solving mind, at the level of engineering or strategy. I had to simply hold the creative tension or tonos between those two opposites for long enough that a creative solution could naturally arise from deeper within me. Um, and this is a like a deeply, Jung described this process, and it became like the individuation process that he talks about. But what I'm saying about that, even though like this has a very Jungian flavor, I'm saying that he was actually pointing to like a metaphysical structure that's deeper than psychology. So it can be applied in spheres that are not simply intrapsychic development. Um, so he was pointing beyond psychology. He wasn't just pointing to psychology. Um, that's really important here. And yet to be verified, I would say, because like if what I'm saying is true and that I uncovered something that has to do with the reconciliation between any pair of opposites, then it that will then show up not just intrapsychically, not just within one person, but within, for example, the development of whole groups, and indeed within the development of the whole of humanity, is what I believe, or the whole of life.
right. So this principle or this way to reconcile opposites could be universal in terms of maybe biology or um, the psychological dynamics of humans on an individual and collective level, but then also for other animals or maybe even other organisms that aren't animals. So
Yeah, because the
it's
risk here is that
yeah,
this process is only understood in a Jungian way. The risk is that this process is only understood intrapsychically, and that's exactly the trap that Jung fell into.
yeah.
Yeah, like I'm saying that, yeah, when we start talking about the transcendent function, for example, um, it's a way of the for the progression of life. It's a way for life to develop, to express itself in the world. Um, and that's not just within a human individual, that's within um, any individual defined as such. So one way to talk about this, for example, is that if we define a group as an individual, then the same dynamics would apply to that group.
Hmm. Okay, at the most elemental level, there is a there is a transcendent function in some way, and you're saying that there's an intentional method. Maybe method isn't the right word. An intentional stance or set of circumstances that can um, accelerate the transcendent function
Um,
because it would organically unfold over time, right? Especially within a human one person's developmental life.
mhm.
There always is that slow march towards maturation and the bringing reconciling of opposites in the personality and the psyche. But it can be this function can be invoked to speed up the process of this reconciliation.
Yes, I think you're invoking a key problem here, which is this like, um, how do we sort of notice and continue the purpose inherent within nature without derailing it? Because like acceleration, like doing things like lots of stuff and too quickly is a kind of part of the modern condition that is maybe not very healthy. But then there's on the other hand, like if we just sort of twiddle our thumbs and like wait around, then we're going to get booted off the planet. So it's like, how do we orient our agency? Where do we orient the will in this? And this is a problem that Jung was very much concerned with. Um, so yeah, I think like what I want to talk about here is we're talking about the reconciliation between opposites. Then there's this capacity to like define things in terms of two-ness, in terms of duality, in terms of polarity. And the next step would be to try and like make that two-ness transparent so that we're able to participate in each side, but not be trapped within it, that we're able to witness it from a larger sphere of awareness. Um, and this is getting beyond the condition of duality in some way. But it's not getting beyond it to non-duality. Um, it's getting beyond it to the problem of three and four, which is a different place to be. So, um, and then I have to try and describe what this problem of three and four is. And the thing is that that's actually the problem itself. Um, like there's
What
a
do you
way
mean?
that, yeah, well, like this method, like if we're talking about it, like invoking the transcendent function and like bringing it into actuality, then you want to be careful about doing that and about when and how it's done. Um, I think I would say for the moment that I was able to I was able to find a home within myself. And so for me, that has to do with you know, rather than connecting with a sort of bearded white guy in the sky, sort of great father figure who's like manifestly not there, it's about like reconnecting beyond those Judeo-Christian roots to the spirit of the earth, I would say, to the spirit of nature, and feeling that they inherently go together or can be reconciled, and that humanity has a role in facilitating that process too. Um, I know that's like again super abstract and vague. I'm wondering how to talk about this. I think the best example of it is, like, you might have noticed that my mum was sitting behind me when we were talking. And like a while ago, I really wouldn't have been comfortable, you know, recording something with her being there. But now I feel pretty aligned with her and yeah,
Hmm.
pretty comfortable with allowing her to be here with me.
And to you, that might represent that you're, well, obviously that you're probably further along on the journey of reconciling your own, the opposites in your psyche. That you mentioned Mother Earth or nature. Do you think that has a connection? The feminine?
Yeah, so basically like I could perceive that there was this, like, when we had this situation of the conflict of opposites, if we sort of hold this conflict, this tension, what's beneath it? What's underneath it? What's the substance of that problem? And I recognize that this dynamic between what I'm calling three and four is what's beneath it. And that reconciling in some way this relationship between three and four, which I'm trying to describe, could help us. But the thing is that as soon as I start trying to describe that problem, I'm describing it using language which is inherently dichotomizing, which takes us back to the level of two-ness, which is a really tricky trap. So I'm trying to talk about something that can't be captured using language. It's
Right.
really
Okay.
tricky. But yeah, basically what happened, like, because I'm talking about sort of that there's a threeness, there's some kind of trinity, and there's a fourth that in some way doesn't fit in to that trinity. That doesn't have a place within that home. And it's like that's a symbolic or archetypal category, stuff that doesn't fit into this spiritual home. And there are many things that fit into that box, including the shadow, including the feminine, including Mother Earth, including the void, nothingness, I would say. Um, yeah. And so, or the unconscious and the body both also fit into that category. Um, things they go together at a certain level. Um,
Right. Oh, if in I've been reading Game of Thrones. Just it reminded me of their mythology. I'm not sure if this is relevant, but I was just trying to think of another mythological instance of this. And they have the seven gods, and the seventh god is the stranger who represents death, and he's kind of different to the other gods and goddesses. He's kind of in a separate class, and he represents that negation or everything that's the other gods and goddesses are not. And I wonder if that's a similar instance of, but then their mythology does account for that, as in it seems more complete in that way, if it allows for that almost evil, in a way, symbol. Yeah. Um, but Christianity, for instance, does not have symbols for that in their ultimate symbology. Um,
well, they have the devil,
yeah.
right? They have Satan. And they actually, John Milton and Dante and others like have really developed that symbology. Like I'm saying that the Christian version of the split, the dichotomy, this duality, the split condition that we've inherited is between Christ and the devil, Christ and Satan. And the thing is that like this hero archetype that we're asked to embody and to aspire to is for Jung at least, and certainly this is my feeling as well, I would say, um, only on the good side. And it's like, well, what about the evil side? And there is a relationship with that side, but it's a relationship of repression and disallowal and saying that that's not okay. And the thing is that ends up creating all the problems of repression that Jung points to, where we're very unconscious of our own dark side, which is still a part of us. And so that then we're beset with a really, really tricky problem, which is like, okay, how do we admit and acknowledge the reality of evil in the world? How do we admit and acknowledge the reality of our own dark side so that we can consciously be aware of that darkness within us, but not, but retain our morality, which is the tricky condition, right? Because again, like with this problem of opposites, the thing is that we want to be able to participate in both sides. Because if we can only participate in one, then the other side is projected or externalized, or is cast outward. And that's how we get tribalism. That's how we get the destruction of the other. It's the problem is over there. It's with those guys. They're evil. They're the strangers. Not me. I'm the best, right? And so this solution is to be able to like participate in both sides. And that inherently means being able to participate in evil. Because if we can't do that, then we project it. But the thing is that if we're talking about participating in evil, well, that's obviously like that's a real moral challenge of like how can we, if we understand that we have to be able to hold these creative tensions between dualities within us, and that what humanity is actually this capacity to hold and transmute and alchemize and transform these dualities. If we really understand that, then what we need is a way to internalize or take within or introject this problem between the split condition, this problem between good and evil, but then without performing misdeeds, without being a bad actor, without creating evil into the world. And that's a tall order, and that's exactly the problem that I was beset with.
Right. So is this kind of saying that the only way to minimize the worst excesses of evil is to become friends with your own personal devil, or however you'll conceptualize your own shadow?
Integrating the shadow, yes, yes.
Yeah.
And many writers have written about that, not just Jung. It's like, I mean,
Yeah.
Peterson's point as well of like, yeah, we all have the capacity to be that Nazi prison guard within us. Can we really grapple with that? Can we really reckon with that? Can we really come to terms with that? Um, can we be in dialogue with that part of ourselves? Can we make, yeah, where interestingly, like the Bible says, the meek shall inherit the earth. And meek actually means like those who keep their swords sheathed in terms of etymology. It's kind of like this thing where true virtue is not to be harmless. True virtue is being able to be harmless, but then choosing not to. And that really requires this capacity for integrated shadow, right? It requires us to have access to our own darkness, to our own cruelty, to our own vindictiveness, but then to include that within a larger sphere of our being. Nietzsche said, one must be as a sea to receive a polluted stream without becoming impure. And that's I feel, a very apt quote that describes this. One must be as a sea to receive a polluted stream without becoming impure. So can we be large enough to include the darkness within us? Because the thing is that everything has a place within being. Everything has a place in, that's why everything exists. It's like
Yeah.
we don't
Yeah.
actually have the ability to cast out evil from creation because we're not God. Newsflash. And so it's like, yeah, how do we incorporate the reality of our own darkness, so as to, yeah, so as actually to unlock uh, the more beautiful world that our hearts know is possible, as Charles Eisenstein puts it. It's this recognition that our inability to recognize our own darkness is actually what's creating all the evil in the world. It's what's creating this being cut off from each other, cut off from ourselves, cut off from the sacred, and cut off from nature. Um, yeah, it's this disconnection from who we really are, that is actually the source of all the problem, or like one way of approaching it, for sure.
Yeah. From a psychological perspective, that seems to be quite a good diagnosis. I guess there are also structural, I mean, there's the whole infrastructure and social structure side as well. But say if people were generally more individuated and more enlightened in their own shadow and didn't engage in projection as much, then I think institutions and collective decision making would vastly improve, and we would have solved a lot of problems. But there are still kind of okay, I guess to bring it to a global perspective, most people don't have the privilege to focus on these issues of individuation, for example, or kind of being able to think about these grand challenges that humanity faces. And it's still a privileged few who can think about these things. Yeah, I don't know where I'm going with that, but yeah.
Yeah, I just noticed that like when you're talking about that stuff, you're looking up and going up.
Yeah.
And it very quickly becomes too big, right? Like the metacrisis and this like global, it's this whole thing, and it's like, whoa, it's really scary and huge. And like we can talk about that, and I can maybe shed some light on that, and go listen to Daniel Sprachtenberger if or many other
Yeah.
people. Indy Johar comes to mind. Um, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about like a local participation in that problem right now.
Okay. Yeah.
And this is what I meant by yes, I'm approaching it using psychological language. And yes, obviously you're talking about things like, how do we do local governance, and how do we do a circular materials economy, and how do we do, you know, um, better economics as an example that are very much not psychological. And I'm like, yeah, we need all of those, contributing toolkits as well, for sure. But I'm talking about like in terms of Marvin Harris's stack, it's like infrastructure and then social structure and then superstructure. And the superstructural layer is like culture, philosophy, religion, spirituality. And yes, that is the layer that I'm talking about. But it also inherently involves the other three because we just split them up for analytical purposes, right? They're not,
Yeah.
it's actually one integrated reality. And so this is like I am talking about like the metaphysical or theological aspect of the problem, but I'm saying that that's the depth that we need to get to. We can't stop at the level of psychology. And this is what I'm saying. Like I'm trying to invoke Daniel by saying, hey, it's actually the creation of stone tools that is the origin of ecological overshoot in every environment on the planet, because then we could overhunt all the species there, and that breaks the co-selection dynamics and leads to this runaway dynamic in the mimetic sphere, where like the mimetic sphere, the sphere of memes and ideas and human culture, is totally disconnected from the planet, from Mother Earth. And that is the split. And that's exactly what I'm saying, is that like if you think about the energy and the intentionality that goes with stone tool creating, well, think about it. It's splitting, it's cutting, it's dividing, right? And it's the creating of new forms rather than the appreciating of the forms that already exist. And I did, whole videos unpacking this. But I'm saying that time around, again, like the oldest archaeological evidence that we have for the use of stone tools is around 3.4 million years ago, which is around the time of Homo habilis, long before Homo sapiens. I'm saying that not only did the metacrisis arrive around that time, which is like inherently not psychological, that's an infrastructural problem. That's a problem in our, I mean, it's not just infrastructural, right? But I'm pointing to technology there. I'm pointing to the cultures and the laws and rules that were binding the tools in the tools in those cultures that were a huge part of what the problem was. So we can't just look at it psychologically. We have to go back to prehistory. We have to look at our use of tools. We have to look at the whole stack at once. And yes, we can use psychology to do that, but we have to get to a religious, theological, or metaphysical level of regarding what the problem is. And I already pointed to that in terms of the problem of one becomes two. One becomes two is that we create stone tools, that we get split off from our mother. This is the same as the biblical fall. It's the fall from Eden, the fall from paradise into history, the fall into split consciousness. It's the fall away from Mother Earth. So what I'm saying is the creation of stone tools is a secular version of exactly what that splitting is. A more modern adumbration of the same split is the splitting of the atom, namely the nuclear bomb. It's the same split. It's the splitting thing. The split of one becomes two. That's exactly what we're trying to heal. We're trying to heal all split conditions. We're trying to heal all dichotomies. And it's going to take us like some pretty deep work to do that. That's why it's like we're talking about, the split condition, not just in terms of reconnection with our own shadow, although obviously that's a pretty good one to look at. We're talking about the split condition in terms of any pair of opposites that we can talk about. And like that's a big if true claim, right? And that's why that was why it was so impactful for me to wrestle with this. I should pause. That was kind of a lot.
Yeah, I see how that one becomes two can be interpreted on some pretty deep levels in terms of humanity's history and the development of our culture, and the effect of technology as it has been. Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to. I kind of threw a
No,
lot
no,
at
no,
you
no,
just
no, it's okay.
What I was trying to get at really is that yes, we can use psychology, but it's deeper than a psychological problem.
Yeah. Well, interestingly, the infrastructure, social structure, and superstructure are a trinity, but they are all really the same thing. So yeah, that's just another instance of that pattern. Yeah, but it's good to play to your strengths, I guess. Just speaking as individuals here, individual people, coming from a psychology background, it's good to bring that skill set to it, and yeah, and then collaborate with others who have different skill sets, for sure. I mean, that's kind of necessary. Yeah, just wondering where to go from here.
You were wondering about this like experience of quote the self or something.
Yeah.
And I was
Could
originally
we,
trying to get to that. Yeah.
yeah, could I take a quick bathroom break and then
Yes,
we'll,
of course.
yeah,
Yes. Pausing. Okay, resumed. So where were we at in this? We were sort of we've just been describing like the depth and breadth of this whole problem of opposites and how to essentially how to navigate out of the split condition of the fall. Um, and that there might actually be a way of doing that that is being uncovered slowly.
yeah, and now we'll bring it to that intrapsychic example of your own experience with the self.
It sounds
And
so crazy. Yeah.
and this transcendent function that I want to hear more about in terms of the concrete felt experience of how it emerged for you and its relationship with these symbols. Yeah.
Yeah. Importantly, like when we say, it's just like, what is the transcendent function? Well, the transcendent function is like Jung's way of pointing to this like mediating process, which is sort of between and beneath this problem of opposites. So it's another way to language this process of three and four is the transcendent function. And specifically, it's like, as Jung conceptualizes it, it's like when life encounters this like problem out in the world, as in like a developmental challenge that we cannot progress past, then it means we're sort of inhabiting one pole, and that there's like a problem out in the world, which is the other half. And we're sort of bumping up against it, like we're in a dual or split condition, and we cannot go forwards. This is one way of thinking about it. Um, so I use the primordial example of like if a monkey is trying to like get some like bone marrow out of a bone and it can't do that. This is like a pretty clear example of how like life cannot move forwards. It's like it's stuck. Got a problem. It can't progress. And so it then it then sort of falls back on its own inner resources. It has an idea. It experiences an inner process, like something arises from the depths. That's an idea, let's say, and it then uses a tool, sort of primordially, um, or like archetypally, to solve that problem and progress past that problem, past that developmental challenge, and on into life. Like a modern example, I'm saying that a modern example of that is the metacrisis itself. I'm saying that life is sort of bumping up against this challenge of the metacrisis, and it's a recognition that, unless we relate with it, um, then yeah, we're probably going to get booted off the planet. And so this is a pretty good time to um, yeah, recognize, like, inhabit our own humility, and when we can do that, allow a creative solution to emerge from the depths, in the same way as the idea did for the monkey. For Jung, the transcendent function, that's what that is. It's like this process of realizing that our problem solving is not working to solve the problem, whatever it might be, and that therefore we have to just sort of like hold the tension between these opposites, and so take the problem upon ourselves, take it within ourselves, what he would call introject the problem, take it within to an introverted state. And in that condition, he claims that like a natural solution, a creative upwelling or emergence from the depths of our being, from what he calls the self, capital S self, which we could think of as like the higher self, like the core of the essence of who we are, the core of life, the wellspring, the fountain, these kind of symbols. The solution arises from that level of depth, and it arises, so Jung claims, in symbolic form. This is what he talks about as the transcendent function, and this is his, again, his way of languaging um, how the developmental process of reconciliation between opposites works. And he thought he was simply describing an intrapsychic process because he was a psychologist. But my claim is that it's not just psychological, it's not just an intrapsychic process. The intrapsychic sphere, namely the sphere of like one's own inner development, is one sphere within which this problem can arise. But there are also other spheres in which it can arise, namely collective development, the problem of the metacrisis for all of us. Um, so yeah, I think basically what happened is that like this I sort of discovered or worked out in some way that we're sort of inhabiting or stuck within this uh, metaphysical or archetypal key, and that by sort of invoking uh, the meaning of that quote, and like by talking about that quote from Maria Prophetessa, and sort of yeah, I talked about recovering a key to the language of one-heartedness. It's sort of like using this, the creative power of shamanic speech to recover the lost essence of our shared humanity, something like that. That by doing this, that by enacting this skill, that yeah, we could essentially work toward a way of life that was responsive to the metacrisis, that could basically work toward an anti-fragile basis to coordination. That's a key part of the ecology of practice that we need for responding to the situation. Um, that was my feeling, and that was what I worked out. And when I worked that out, it then sort of applied itself within my own being, within my own life. And essentially, what that meant was that it brought up this essential conflict between what we could call good and evil, or ego and shadow. It brought up the confrontation with the shadow, and I was able to sort of stew in that problem for long enough, in exactly the way that Jung described, just like hold the tension between these parts of myself for long enough that a creative solution sort of naturally arose in symbolic form. And that's what you were talking about, where I experienced this, you could say vision, but I had an insight essentially, or what you could call revelation, but it's, yeah, something came over me, an understanding came over me, and I saw a light that I was looking at in a particular way, in a symbolic way, that gave me an understanding of what this relationship with what Jung called the self actually meant. And this was essentially like the arising of that symbol was itself the moment that I sort of realized my own realized the source of my own inner strength in such a way that I could move beyond this tension between opposites that I'd been grappling with. It was the solution in itself, the emergence of the symbol.
But this was the end of, was it 6 separate episodes of holding this tension or confronting the shadow?
They did not all have to do with the shadow, I have to say.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is like a period of deep inner exploration that involves some pretty deep dives to, yeah, I would say reconnecting with my own nature, reconnecting with who I really am. And that, that involves a whole lot of material that we could talk about in terms of, psycho-emotional, stuff that has to do with shame, stuff that has to do with, let me see, like, yeah, like working on these like layers of the personal shadow that have to do with, yeah, different emotions, that have to do with like reconnecting with the soul, that have to do with breath work and yoga for sure. Like I can talk about how this is showing up at like a deeply embodied level. Like it doesn't all have to do with the shadow by any means. Um, but yeah, it did draw out or precipitate that conflict. That's like one aspect of the process that felt centrally important to me.
Mm. Yeah, I see. I see. So there was a lot of complexity to these inner journeys, but the central motif was, or the central theme was eventually coming into contact with this symbol of the self, and that seemed like the most profound um, occurrence in these episodes.
Yeah, it was like again, it was like an intrapsychic application of what I felt that I'd already worked out or d discovered on that first occasion.
Mm.
And the fact of the revelation of that symbol of the self to me was proof that it worked, that it was real. It's hard to say what I mean by that. It's kind of like actually don't know how to explain that in a different way. But yes, it's like yes, the emergence of that symbol of the self um, was to me like proof of concept of something. It was like it's kind of the problem of Sam, what you talk about is great, but if it doesn't work for you, then why should it work for anyone else? And this was the occasion when it really did work for me.
Mm.
Does that make sense? It's kind of like this, um, yeah, I mean, it's this deep problem that I was wrestling with, and then a solution to that problem sort of naturally emerged. And that was sort of, to me, sort of proof of the viability of my own life. It was proof of the um, viability of the formula or scheme that I'd been talking about. Um, but I want to be careful about that language because it's not exactly a method. It's not exactly can't be turned into an algorithm. Um,
Yeah, because there was this confluence of different factors for you in your personal life and um, your wider kind of uh, where you were located and your relationships and the things that you were grappling with. Um, they all led to uh, these experiences. So we can't discount the context. That's kind of the most important thing. Yeah. So there's no procedure for bringing about these revelations, I guess. But they happen now, and they happened when they should have happened, I guess. Sounds like it was the right time for you, and I don't know what Jung would say about that. About these symbols appear when they're necessary for well, you said that you did hold these opposites in tension, and that was kind of necessary for the self to appear. Um, is that what you're saying? I might be
Yeah,
misunderstanding a bit.
yes. So it's in some way the idea that there is a creative intelligence that is close to the source of life, which is quite different than our ego. It's kind of the
Yeah.
source of our inner strength, and that it has a creative power. And that creative power is sort of drawn upon in moments of crisis, that we fall back upon our own inner resources. We fall back on who we really are in the core of ourself, right?
Mm.
And it's this, yeah, when we really encounter a problem that we can't solve rationally, that we're really caught in, that we're really stuck in, such as this problem that I was grappling with, that's when this creative emergence arises. And it gives rise to symbols. It gives rise to, yeah, it leads to a creative solution, firstly, symbolically, and then we can sort of unpack the implications of that symbol. Um, yeah, I guess. And the thing is that I'm like we're talking about this process that can again reconcile sort of any pair of opposites. And the idea would be that all we have to do, I mean, and this is a difficult ask, is like define a fundamental polarity. Like what's the key tension that we're in tension with here? And then hold that. And then allow for the creative emergence of these symbols, which is again, there's a certain way of allowing for that to happen, where the idea would be that these symbols, these yeah, creative emergent products of synthesis between binaries, they can reconcile, unify, heal, mend, repair the split within our being.
Mm. Okay.
I don't know. Yeah, it's kind of like I have to keep hitting it from many different angles to try and
Yeah, yeah.
make
It's
a lot of
difficult
sense
to
of this. Yeah, it's really difficult to language.
yeah. I'm just trying to put it into my own,
Yeah.
find parallels in my own experience. As you know, I like to write down my dreams, and I find that I guess recently in the past few months, because so much has changed, I've been dreaming quite a lot more, and um, I've been having quite a few sexual dreams recently, and I'm not sure in the Jungian sense. I mean, it's so subjective, these how these symbols appear, I guess, um, based on people's cultural upbringing and their idiosyncrasies. But um, I think I do feel these kind of these unsolved problems in my life that I can't rationally solve for one reason or another. And I guess I'm dreaming quite a bit, and maybe in a similar way, that's the transcendent function showing up in terms of my unconscious trying to play out some patterns in my dreams and represent these intrapsychic problems that I'm dealing with. Um, but I'm not getting consistent symbols of I mean, I don't think I'm getting any symbols of the self or of wise old people as Jung would put it in one way, which is a common manifestation. But then or the mandala or yeah, circles. Yeah, so I think I'm probably dealing with different psychic problems or a different stage. But yeah, I'm just trying to is that kind of hitting on the same theme of
Yeah, for sure.
during times of psychic challenges or turbulence, the unconscious will become more active in a way, and try to
Yes.
represent these challenges in symbols during dreams or even during waking consciousness in certain states if you're yeah Yeah.
If you get there, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
I want to say yes. I then want to say that there's a certain principle here from Martin Buber of like the I-thou relationship, where it's not just about like the emergence of these symbolic forms. There's like images, visions, revelations, ideas. It's then about relationship with them. So like and like for Jung, this is like these are the symbols of what he would call the self, what we can think of as the higher self, like the core of who we are, something like that. And it's about the relationship between that center of consciousness and our ego and building that relationship, and that the symbols mediate that relationship. So
Sorry,
it's
could you recap that? It's
yeah. Yeah, it's like that the symbols that we're talking about, whether they be in dreams or visions, they come from somewhere.
yeah.
They come from what Jung would call the self, which we could think of as a kind of a unifying center of consciousness, which is um, unifying center of the psyche, which is deeper than the center of just our consciousness or the ego. It's a deeper center within us. So this is why I'm connecting it with like the core of who we are, like our true self, um, something like this. And the idea is that the symbols, these creative solutions to the problem between opposites, they emerge from that level of our being,
Mm.
right? So this is a way of saying that is that the metacrisis is a problem that we're beset with out in the world. And we have to recognize that we actually can't solve that problem. And
Yeah.
that recognition can allow us to find the humility to get out of our own way such that a creative solution can arise from the depths of our being, arise from the core of who we are, from the core of life. And the thing is that when those symbols, when those creative emergent phenomena, when they arise, they're pointing beyond themselves to that center of consciousness, which is deeply within us at a deep level of our being. And it's about participating in those symbols that arise so as to build a relationship with that center of consciousness within us.
Right. So the intrapsychic kind of grappling with these symbols and unearthing them is necessarily part of the response to the metacrisis.
Yeah, it's the opening
Yeah.
salvo in an opening relational process. It's what
Yeah.
Viveki would call a reciprocal opening process. The purpose of symbols, the function of symbols, is to open us up, is to cohere a certain relationship. Yeah, and so it's
Yeah.
definitely about participating more deeply in a symbolic way of life and in symbols themselves, and in what they point beyond themselves to, what symbols point to,
Mm.
right? And so it's about building a relationship with what some people would call God. It's about building a relationship with the divine within or the transcendent within. And it's an I-thou relationship. It's not a relationship of subservience or of um, it's not a transactional relationship. It's a yeah, it's a well, it has all the complexities that a relationship has, I think. Because the thing is, like as soon as I define it that way, um, that's actually another version of the polarity, the opposites, right? Which is why it's so tricky. Because we're
What do you
talking
mean?
about what I'm talking about is like I just defined the solution, let's say, in terms of building a relationship with another center of consciousness.
Yeah.
And I just defined a dichotomy or a duality, right? As well. And that's even that way of talking is sort of still taking us back to being stuck in two-ness.
Yeah.
And so that's why I'm focusing on these symbols, just like Jung was pointing to, and Corbin and Hillman and many people. It's about these symbols that emerge from the creative center of who we are. These symbols themselves, they allow us to access something which is between any two that we conceptualize. So there's something about symbolic cognition and participating in symbols and allowing for their emergence and unpacking what they mean and participating in them at the deepest level. We can talk about what I mean by that. But yeah, it's not just it's about getting beyond any kind of two that we can conceptualize.
Mm.
And symbols really help us to do that. Another way to say that is that symbols help us connect with the core of life and recover what we've lost.
Yeah, I see. I see.
And that's exactly what dreams are pointing to.
Mm. So the symbols are kind of they mediate the relationship between the ego and the broader self. They're kind of the glue that holds them. Oh, I don't know if that's the right metaphor, but they're the Schelling points, the meeting place of the the self and the ego. Um, yeah, I I see what you mean. Um, okay. I'd like to wrap up fairly soon, just because
Yeah.
I have quite a busy day ahead of me. But I'm really enjoying this. I think it's still quite abstract, but
Yeah.
that's okay. It it's hard not to be. Um, Maybe we could talk about one more thing and then wrap up. Is how does
Just
that sound
one
with you?
more. Yeah, yeah, just one more thing. We'll try and yeah. Again, it's like tricky with these sort of things where like you have to try and judge what to share and what not to share. And yes, it's abstract. I also think, yeah, like for reasons of privacy and wanting to try and be understandable, yeah, it's necessary to be abstract in that way. But yeah, I think like when you take, we're talking about like several months and years of work here, and then trying to boil that down into one conversation is necessarily difficult. And as we keep like, yeah, hitting this from different angles together, then we can draw out elements of it that are like both less personal and like more collaborative and co-creative. Um, yeah, but that also like can become more clear.
Hmm.
Because
Yeah.
ultimately it's not about something to remember. It's about what's here now and getting more intimate and connected with that.
Hmm. Yeah. The propositional knowledge of this, all of these thinkers is not necessarily necessary. It's more about the process, I guess. Yeah. But I guess these that system that you mentioned at the start of the monastic kind of model of local governance and um, having these ecology practices does not exist. So it's still kind of a bit of a visionary thing to talk about. Um, but I think, I mean, the people are obviously responding to the meaning crisis in different ways. A lot of them are negative. Um, hmm.
Wait, so if I can just, I want to mention that like we're talking about like the cultural level of response to the meta crisis meaning crisis combo. And we're saying like as per Jordan Hall's Civium project, or at least I'm saying as per Jordan Hall's Civium project, that people are slowly moving out of cities and reconvening in communities of less than Dunbar size and establishing a kind of, like wisdom schools, wisdom gyms, that involve an ecology of practices and community of practitioners and a more viable worldview suitable for the 21st century, that a kind of catalytic community to solve the kind of trust apocalypse. And this
Hmm.
is like there is a decentralized network of, uh, yeah, emergent communities that are popping up around the world where it's a kind of archetype in our generation that people are like, oh, I want to start a retreat center and be, part of a co-living experiment or, live with others. This is something that many, 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 many people are doing. And it's kind of like going to be like increasingly more of that. And then we're talking about solving many of the different problems that arise in those contexts. And I'm sort of going to be able to, or hopefully, apply and share many different tools that can contribute to that. But one in particular that we've been trying to get different angles on in this conversation, namely the problem of reconciliation between opposites. But yeah, I want to say yes, of course, people are responding to the metacrisis and mini crises negatively for sure. But I'm also talking about like a real cultural wave of response that's happening right now, and I'm hoping to contribute a piece of that.
Mm. Yeah, yeah.
And I could even be more specific, like in terms of this vision of the self that appeared to me, it appeared like again in terms of this like participating more deeply in the symbols that emerged from the I don't know the depth of who I am to sort of create or initiate this relationship with yeah, the deep core of who I am, what Jung would call the self. And the way that I thought about that is that our developing a relationship with ourself actually gives birth to the future. And I don't really know how to put that in words that are more clear than that. I really feel that the future arises the future arises into actuality, into life, into being through our deepening our relationship with ourself, with the core of who we are. And if we apply that in groups, what I mean is that if we can allow space for the natural emergence of these co-created symbolic realities, then that can facilitate the emergence of states of group unity and establish stable states of group flow. And essentially, this is part of the protocol layer for sustainable community, sustainable culture that can essentially give birth to the future in a cultural and community context, not just in the context of an individual life. So it's something about getting in deeper touch with this symbolic layer of being, right? Something about allowing for the collaborative co-creation of these emergent phenomena, these emergent symbols. Something about doing that gives birth to the future in real time, in real community, with real people.
Mm.
What I was trying to do there is bridge a little bit between how this shows up intrapsychically and how it shows up in group contexts that actively contributes to, yeah, working on the problem that is like very real and not going anywhere anytime soon.
Yeah,
I hope it helps a little. Sorry to
yeah,
again
yeah.
throw this all at you, but there you go.
No, no, it's okay. It's okay. I'm just a bit tired today, actually. Been sleeping on the floor so for the last 2 nights. Um,
Yeah,
yeah. Um, I think that might be a good place to end it, if that's
yeah.
okay. And the
Well, can we
recording.
check in? Like, where does that leave you at the end of this? I know this is super, like, yeah, not very smooth of me, but yeah, has to get
No,
out one way or another. But yeah, how are you left? Like, what are you left thinking about or feeling, or what are you left with toward the end as we wrap up?
I guess we have been circling around the same principle for most of the talk today, and it's necessarily something that we can't really put into words. So it's difficult to tap into. That's part of the problem, I guess. I feel like I understand a little bit more about you when you're talking about your personal experience with reconciling the opposites and um, how intrinsically that kind of holding those tensions and allowing for these symbols to emerge can happen. I think I still find it hard to draw upon my own experience and relate to that, probably because it either hasn't happened in the same way, or I just can't. Maybe it's happened in more subtle ways. Yeah, but I'm happy. I'm curious to learn more about it, and yeah, I feel like talked about a lot of things today. Yeah, yeah, I haven't read nearly as much Jung or Buber or most of those thinkers, unfortunately. So I can't engage on the same level of theoretical depth, but that's okay. It doesn't have to be like that.
It
I
really
guess in a
doesn't.
way, it's almost a test of your understanding if you can explain it to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that makes it more real as well. It forces you to ground it in your own experience,
Hmm.
or to simplify it. Yeah, yeah. I guess.
Hmm.
Yeah. I don't think I have anything else to share, but thank you
Well, we
for
can,
the chat today. And
yeah.
yeah, always happy to chat. And it's cool that this is being recorded. So
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, there's something symbolic about that. In the sense of a third here recording all the language that we're using to, contribute to some kind of void, some kind of void or other, that's listening, hopefully. Um, yeah, in this context, like where the AI would be the third, and that the language that we're using is also that third that's being recorded. And the thing is that that language is coming from and then pointing to a context, namely the context of the truth of who we are, which is also the void in the sense of emptiness from Buddhism. Um, that was a little, yeah. We're sort of caught in attention in this episode of
mm,
trying to like sort of recount and boil down a lot of like memory, right? But then ultimately, I'm not talking about something which can be explained. It's rather something to participate in. It's something to that hopefully we can like demonstrate together and like get the hang of, get the feel for. And I think like yeah, as I like get past a lot of the sort of storytelling element of it, and if I can maybe be a little bit less frenetic and need to share less material and instead just kind of be here with you and talk about what it's like to be here with you, then we can get a better handle on demonstrating this in real time rather than talking about something that happened previously, if that
right.
makes sense. Because what I'm talking about here is sort of like, yeah, talking about what's going on, either in terms of my mum being present or your mum being present as well, or like the AI being here with us, talking about like what's happening in real time as a way of like unveiling or disclosing what that means in symbolic terms, where we could sort of uncover and unpack the relationship between three and four as it's present with us in real time.
Mm.
But we'll see.
Yeah, we could definitely explore that in the future. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.